You are about to enjoy a Firearms Radio Network podcast. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows. If you like what we're doing and would like to help support the show, visit patreon.com/afteractionproject. If you'd like to throw us some free support and appreciation, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes or anywhere you're listening to this podcast. And then tonight's episode, just like every episode, is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network. Be sure to check out the other great podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network by visiting firearms-radio.net. Our other show sponsor is the RangeBuddy.App. If you haven't checked that out, be sure to give it a little looky-loo. It's available on Android and iOS. It's a collection of over 130 shooting drills. They're all sorted by the required target type. So if you go out to the range with a B8 target, you can select B8 targets, and it'll tell you the drills that you can run with your target. There is an individual leaderboard for each one of those drills, as well as a training session tracker. We just rolled out a pretty big update that revamped that part of the app specifically. The old training tracker or practice session tracker was, I don't know the polite way to say it. It was just, it was not good at all. So that got a nice little revamp on there. And then in my opinion, the coolest part about that app is the virtual instructor component. So it's RangeBuddy app available on iTunes and the Google Play Store. Tonight's episode 82, we are joined by Dr. Sherman House of Civilian Defender, and we'll be discussing his Hemorrhage Arrest Course. His student for that course is, you guys know him, you love him. It's Ak of, gosh darn it, I'm a big old dummy.
Citizen Safety Academy.
You got it.
Yep, citizensafety.com.
Hey, Jeremy, what's Ak's name? What's his first and last name?
I'm not going to. Don't do that to me, man. I almost made it through this. Did I mess up your last name last time? I don't know if I did. Andy said I did. It's Akil Kadar, right?
Kadir, you got it. That's close enough.
I messed up.
You got it wrong.
I got like John Smith's name wrong too.
It's like that John Smith, man. I'm good with good efforts, man. That was a great effort, so I appreciate it.
God. Gosh darn it. That will hopefully be the worst part about the whole podcast today. So, Dr. Sherman House, we had you on last time as a student. Today you're in the instructor seat. We're going to be talking about your Hemorrhage Arrest Course. So talk to us a little bit about that class and what got you into the instructor side of the firearms world.
Okay, so I started teaching proper firearms in 2006 with James Yeager at Tactical Response in Camden, Tennessee. And, I started as a firearms instructor. And at that time, I was in school in Nashville at the Meharry Medical College. And James asked me, I want you to design a medical course that is vocationally generic, that would work for anybody, whether they were a kindergarten teacher or a law enforcement officer, that would help them address the leading causes of what we knew at the time, from battlefield deaths in the global war on terror. So that was, massive hemorrhage, airway obstruction, and then pneumothorax, or a ruptured or a collapsed lung. And so I said, okay. So I used some material from a guy named Dr. Keith Brown that I was friends with, who was an emergency physician that did overseas consulting work for like missionary groups and then also for military contracting companies, and then kind of mixed that with what I had amassed in my life's experience as a professional first responder before I went to school. And we put it into a class and called it Immediate Action Medical, and taught that for several years. And then I always, would joke around, even with James, like when he was still alive, and say that like I was the only tactical response instructor who left of their own volition under good terms. I mean, like James would still, have me come back and teach. I always joke and say that I was like a professor emeritus, at Tactical Response, because I'd still come back and teach something for them at least once a year. And so then when I started, my practice got busy enough that I just didn't have the bandwidth to be a single parent and then, work there at the same time. So I was teaching on my own and needed something to call the class. And so I called it the Hemorrhage Arrest Course. And then a couple of years later, Stop the Bleed got really popular. And I'd always tell people, like, when they'd say, well, I can take your class for, at the time, I think it was like $75 or something, or I can take the Stop the Bleed class for free. Like, what's the difference between your class and their class? And I would always say, well, the difference is the only thing they teach about is stopping bleeding. So that's one thing that you might encounter, but like not every problem is a bleeding problem. So I called it the Hemorrhage Arrest Course just because I thought it was kind of cool to have like an acronym, HACK. Like I took a HACK course and I tested it out at Akil's place first. That was a long time ago. I mean, that was, I was still making jokes back then about, I would always tell people that I went to the Meharry Medical College and I was the white guy of 09 and everybody would laugh. So it was close enough to 09 that everybody laughed. So, if you don't get the joke, it's because Meharry Medical College is a historically black college and university, one of 3 medical colleges in the entire United States that is HBCU. So, that's the inside joke there, I guess. Akil gets it. But anyway, at the time, it was funny because, there was only a few groups in 2006 that were teaching, open enrollment classes. There was Tom Givens, doing range master stuff out in Memphis. And then there was a couple other organizations. And like, we're literally teaching people how to defend themselves with firearms, which involves putting lead into the person that's trying to kill you. And people were mad about us teaching a medical class. They were like, the liability involved, it's so dangerous. And I thought, like, that was the first time kind of where it really sunk into me that, man, people don't get it. The difference is, like, for example, when people say, the liability of doing CPR on somebody is really great. No, it's actually not, because you only do CPR on dead people. Like, you don't start CPR on someone unless they have no pulse and they're not breathing. And so, the worst thing that's going to happen is that person's going to stay dead. But there's a good chance, well, not a great, it's an okay chance.
It's an okay chance.
Yeah. I think that the statistics without defibrillation is, with just CPR alone is, 6 or 7%. With defibrillation, I think it maybe jumps up to around like 25%, So, but, people were tripping about us just talking about putting a tourniquet, a pressure bandage, or even some wound packing on people. And so, it took a long time for that to get kind of into the zeitgeist where it started to make sense. And it just was crazy because nobody outside of really a lot of operating rooms understood that tourniquets were used every day in the operating room with 0 bad outcomes, or I should say very few bad outcomes, and are predictable and relatively safe. But again, it's one of those things where if you have a life-threatening injury to one of your limbs and you are rapidly exsanguinating, bleeding to death from an injury, if you don't do something, you're going to die. So do you want to watch someone that you know or love or are related to die? Like, I don't. If the difference between that and them dying and them living is me putting a tourniquet on them, whether it's something that is purpose built or improvised. I mean, that seems like a pretty easy decision tree to me, but what do I know? So, and then as things went on and I taught these classes more and more, that's when active shooter stuff unfortunately started becoming, a big part of the cultural zeitgeist. And so I started teaching to church, religious groups, not just Christian groups, but, Jews, Muslims, everybody, that's kind of one of the things that I really struggle with these days is people think that terrorists look some kind of way, and they don't. It's just like, Akil and I have joked before about him and I have worked in some of the craziest places this country's got, like some of the most economically depressed places around. And I always tell people, I've been to the white hood, I've been to the Mexican hood, I've been to the black hood, I've been to the Asian hood. The only thing difference in the hood is the food. That's it. So, the only thing that's different with terrorism and the threat of terrorism and active shooters is where those people are from. That's it. I mean, there's no difference. And so, it's especially prescient these days. I mean, just in the last 48 hours, when people have seen like these, en mass casualty incidents happen in Israel, and realize that a system that is that prepared as Israel has been for decades, since 1948, still got overwhelmed, So when you think about things that happen here domestically in our own country, for example, like the Route 91 Harvest Festival shooting in Las Vegas, that the Las Vegas metro system was completely overrun. There was more people injured than they had resources to treat. Mm-hmm. So if you aren't physically prepared to be your own first responder and hope that the professional second responders are going to show up eventually, your odds of surviving that encounter go down rapidly. So, and that's one of the hardest things for me to convince people is that, you can watch YouTube videos on this stuff all day long. And it's like, you can watch YouTube videos of Jerry Miculek, shooting down a plate rack in 1.89 seconds from the draw. You can watch that all day long, and you can dry practice that, but that's not going to make you have a 1.89, draw speed and 6 shots. It doesn't work that way. So you can't just miracle up some medical skills and improvise them on the fly when you need them. Like, you need them right now. And I think that, if you're a parent, I think that you kind of have an obligation because you have children, and children are accident prone, and I mean, my own kid, he's 17 now, but his big old head, he's fallen into stuff before and cracked his scalp open, and cracked his eyebrow open one time. So, we don't have a coffee table here because I've seen more injuries from coffee tables over my career than I have from just about any other piece of furniture in the house. And, if you don't know how to, control a wound with direct pressure, you're going to have a problem. And it's not difficult to do, but until somebody shows you like how much pressure you have to use for direct pressure, it might be a little more than you think. And so, it's very, very difficult to sell medical classes, convince people of their need. And I mean, I've taught, I don't know, I think probably about 6 or 7 classes, with Akil at his place. And, we've had classes out there where there's been 20 people in the class. And we've had classes out there where there's been like, 5 people in the class. And there's been times where there's been 20 tickets sold to the class and 4 people show up. So, it's just kind of baffling to me. I don't give refunds, unless you hit me up and you've got some, crazy excuse about why you can't make it, So, I mean, literally, I do all right financially, but I don't do all right enough where I can just skate by on a something that I buy a ticket to attend to and just be like, I don't need that, So it's weird. And talking to, my buddies in the business, like Caleb Causey, at Lone Star Medics, he's, hits these slumps of training and stuff. And everybody just gets real comfortable and thinks that, the system will take care of them and they'll call 911 and everything will show up. But it's like, one of the big things that we always say is, you have to be your own first responder in terms of lethal force confrontations. But people think that it doesn't carry over to medical. And, Akil and I have both been professional first responders, on the law enforcement side of the house. And I can tell you that I've watched people die because the scene was not secure. And you can't have fire and EMS, tearing through the place and loading people on gurneys and stuff if there's still people running around shooting and stabbing. It's not tactically feasible. So if you're one of those people that's laying there and you're bleeding, you got to be able to do something about it, because we're trying to eliminate or contain the threat. And, no one's got time to crouch down there next to you and render aid until all of the threats have been either, neutralized or essentially arrested. So, this kind of fallacy that people have about if I'm injured, I don't need to carry medical stuff because, fire EMS will be along eventually. Yeah, they'll be along eventually, but it might not be in the time that you need them and the volume of blood that you have. So yeah, I think it's definitely one of those things that doesn't get the exposure and the coverage and the necessity attributed to it that I wish that it did. And I mean, I don't care if you take training from me. I do this as, an extra thing that I do. I primarily, I work at a regular clinical practice 4 days a week, and I'm doing okay. So I don't need to do this to pay my bills. I do it because I enjoy teaching and I enjoy, helping people in the community. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of people that do this kind of stuff full time, and it's really hard to make a living doing it because people, unfortunately, like a lot of things, they don't realize the need for it until after they've become a victim. So that was a really long-winded answer. Sorry.
That was a great intro. I mean, I think you gave us a lot to unpack just with the introduction there alone. I was just thinking of, the CPR thing. My wife and I took a CPR class here recently, and the instructor kind of believes that low percentage, number one, for the obvious reasons. And another thing is because the lack of the amount of people that know how to accurately do CPR and who are willing to get involved quickly, because the quicker you get onto CPR, the higher the chance of that person survives. And a lot of people don't know how to do it, or they call 911 and they sit there and time's ticking, right? And so, there's this belief that we could get that 5 to 6% up to maybe 10% if more people learned and got just CPR alone, right? So I think that's one of the things that I was just kind of thinking about. Do you teach, is this based on the March protocol? Because I noticed that the MAR part, is it kind of a shorter version of that, or?
Well, so the March protocol is good, and it's based on TCCC. The problem is when you try to apply the TCCC, which is the Tactical Combat Casualty Care model, to the kindergarten teacher or, the guy who works at a factory, it doesn't always make the best sense. Because let's say somebody is injured by it could be something as banal as like a motor vehicle accident, a piece of machinery, or an active shooter. If you don't do something to eliminate that continuing existential threat, massive hemorrhage control isn't going to make a lick of difference. So, I had to come up with a way to have an algorithm that people could easily memorize, but that also made them be wary of like what we call in the first responder world, like scene safety. So, if you've got a motor vehicle accident, which is the most common thing that people have used this training for, just because, everybody is on the road at some point. If you happen upon a motor vehicle accident, there's a chance that, the car could catch on fire. There's a chance that, if the car is rolled or anything like that, that it may continue rolling. If it's a motor vehicle accident, the biggest hazard that you have is other people on the damn roadway, because they're not paying attention. They're up in their phone, they're messing with the radio. They're, whooping up on their kids in the back seat, doing whatever they're doing, and not paying attention to, what's going on at 12 o'clock low. And so if if I gave just people just an algorithm that was relative to just medicine, then to lay people, then it leaves out a big part of the puzzle and a big part of what I think is the biggest part of the problem. So, there's a guy that Akil and I are friends with, who took my class, and then I think 2 days later used it in a range accident where, well, I should say it wasn't really an accident. I mean, it was a negligent discharge, not by him, but by people that were patrons at the range that he was employed by. And had he, it was one of those things where it was an accident, a negligent discharge happened. The people that were handling the weapon didn't realize, like, the most likely time for another negligent discharge is right after the first one, and didn't secure the weapon and had another one. And then now you've got, two people with lower extremity injuries that need to be treated. Well, the first thing that he did was secure that weapon, and get it empty, unloaded, and grounded to the point where, it's an open bolt gun. It's not going to go off again. People don't realize open bolt guns, the World War II era, like, they weren't doing drop safe back in those days, and so had we just gone into a medical algorithm, that would omit a big portion of that problem, which was scene safety, so, and who knows what would have happened had he not done that. If he would have just left that thing on the bench with a magazine in it, and now you got two people laying on the ground and people are moving gurneys around and stuff, and somebody knocks that thing off the bench and it, touches off another burst, then, now we've added to the problem. So, whether, I always tell people, like, whether it's a motor vehicle hazard, or whether it is an active shooter, or some type of interpersonal violence, or whether it's a swarm of bees or fire, all these things I've seen before and had to deal with on scenes before. If you don't, make that safe first, all of your life-saving efforts are in vain, because either the responders themselves are going to end up becoming victims, or they're going to, not do any good for the person who is the one that's injured, because now they've become part of the problem.
Yeah, indeed. Jeremy and I have taken some medical classes, and, it goes without saying, a lot of us already know this, but for somebody that may be watching the show that's just getting familiar with medical training, Jeremy and I could sit here on our own show and just talk about the amount of times that we've done medical things that we probably wouldn't even have tried to do prior to medical training. And nothing crazy, it was just one was a car accident or a motorcycle accident I rolled upon. Jeremy had one of his employees cut themselves with a knife at work. Gosh, there's so many that I can think of. We had a lady on the range passed out on us because they got the shingles shot the day before they came out for range day, had a loaded gun in her hand. And I wouldn't have known what to do. I would have just stood there like, oh shit, I don't know what to do. Call 911 here, right? But it's huge. And I think just beyond all the self-defense and all the gun stuff we do, somehow if we could get this class out to just normal everyday people, like you said, and we could get them to take the course, is huge. But I want to kick it over to Ak, and Ak, give us a little bit of your background as far as medical training and kind of your background on that.
Well, to be honest, I didn't get a whole lot of medical training. I was a cop on Buffalo Police Department in Buffalo, New York, and our medical training was wait for the fire department to get there, unfortunately, or the EMTs. We did, make sure that, the scene was more secure for those guys to come in. But other than that, we would stand around, and there was plenty of times I stood around and watched guys take their last breath. Because like I said, we didn't train, and the prevailing thought was, no, I don't want to get in trouble if I do it wrong. That kind of crap that got passed around a lot. So nobody did a lot about it. Then I got into the training junkie thing in the late 90s. And then as I got into the 2000s, I realized that it was something that I had to do. And so started studying, taking classes from some of the big names at that time. And this wasn't this wasn't as early as 2006. I wouldn't say that the first medical class I took was probably in like 2012 or something like that. Because then I was thinking more along with being an instructor, and I started to feel like, well, if I'm an instructor and I'm teaching people how to make holes, and I'm on the range a lot, and I would see things happen on the range, and we would just sit there and wait again for the EMTs to get there, and bad things would happen. So I was like, it's got to be a better way. And then you started kind of seeing it come into the industry more, where people started talking about it. And, I remember I was a follower of James Yeager at the time. I wasn't taking classes, but I thought, he was one of the first people I saw that was doing that kind of thing. And so I started getting trained. By the time I hooked up with Sherman and brought Sherman around, I had already had about 40 hours of medical training in that regard, besides the CPR crap that I had to have. I was a Red Cross, first aid, CPR, whatever that thing was, heart saver instructor for Red Cross or American Heart Association. So I did that for government contracts, but it wasn't about, any type of serious hemorrhage control or trauma treatment or anything like that. So went out, took a bunch of classes. And then I was first exposed to Sherm at Paulipalooza, and he did a little thing at Paulipalooza. And I was like, this dude is cool. You know what I'm saying? Because that's a part of it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, really, if you like a person, you like the way they present stuff, it's like, it sinks a little more. You know what I'm saying? It was what I thought about at the time was it was very practical. He had a very practical approach to it. Where some of the training I had was great, but it was, nothing that I could retain very well, over a year or two or whenever I could go. I finally got to the point where I believe that, a medical class is something that I should take annually, which was great when Sherman was in my area, because that's what we essentially was trying to do. I put it on for students, and I put it on, I had them come around for instructor candidates, because, we do a lot of gateway instructor development. And so I'm telling those guys, hey, if you're teaching people this stuff and you're on the range, don't be the guy that has to sit there and watch somebody die. That's terrible. You know what I'm saying? You should be doing this. You should be, knowledgeable in this, and you should be encouraging your students to do this, because this is, again, something that they can use. They'll probably use before they use a firearm. This is something that they may have to use in everyday life. And again, most of us have come to some situation where either a car accident or, something happened around our house. We've actually used this stuff, and I have, So the thing was bringing instructors in, but really what was behind it was me wanting to stay fresh on it. And so we would bring Sherman every year to do his class. But after, going around and taking different classes and having my kits and all that type of stuff. And then I said, well, Sherman's local and he's solid dude. Let me bring him in. And I was blown away by his class, because it was different from the rest, in that it was the most. One thing that we're about with the gateway stuff is, making it, codifying stuff and making it very practical and simple, so that, every person can really apply it and, and hold it. And if you make it too complicated, people adult learning theory tells us what, 6 months from that, 3 months from that, 6 months from that, 9 months from that, they got less and less and less. So, what can we focus on are the main parts that we need to have. And Sherman had that stuff codified so smooth. His 4-hour class is what I first brought him for, and it was dope because we were like, afterward, everybody was like, that was the best class I've had. And I'm saying this as haven't taken Caleb Causey's class yet. That's my man. That's the homie Caleb Causey. I haven't taken his class yet. I mean to. It's just the distance. But Sherman's thing was like the 4-hour class. We were all blown away by it. And because, like I said, he broke it down. And not only that, he had, like you said earlier, he added the context to it. So he added the, all right, we're gun guys. So as gun people, what I'm saying, we have to take the scene into consideration first. You know what I'm saying? So he had the bad guys. Then he had, then he had the bleeding, then the breathing. He had broken down in a way we were like, okay, this is directly, applicable. I don't have to weed through it. And then he said, TCCC is nice, but it's not really applicable for everybody who's not going to study it to that level. And that's right up our alley. So his class was smoking, and after that, I was like, I got to bring this dude in every year. You know what I'm saying? And so we would try. And unfortunately, he's right about the industry and how serious people take this stuff. Unfortunately, this is the most important class, but like most of the stuff, like the mindset class, or the how to stay out of trouble class, I can't sell. You know what I'm saying? How to get out of trouble class, I can sell with a gun, or a knife or something like that. But the how to stay out of trouble class, nobody wants because it's not sexy. And unfortunately, this medical stuff, people don't feel it's sexy. So, and then after that, he was like, hey, man, I got an 8-hour version. And I was like, cool. So what's that about? And then he went to another level with it where it was, he introduced, we're big on reality-based training, really big on it. And so then the 8-hour version brought in some scenario training. And Sherman's nuts, if you know him, and it was just crazy. We have a good time coming up with crazy scenarios and stuff. I mean, stuff that was applicable, and people would have a really good time. And that's important to us because we believe that when people have a good time and they have those, that dopamine going in their body, that those good emotions anchor the learning, So we would have people literally go, hey, I had medical people who had other medical training. A lot of the guys who had taken a class that had medical training before said that was the most applicable class that they had ever taken. And now I'm just sad because my man moved across the country, so I don't know what I'm gonna do.
I'll still come back there.
All right, man. Good.
I promise.
Good. And so it got frustrating towards the end because I couldn't fill the classes the way I wanted to, because he's a busy guy, and he's got to practice and everything, and I'll try to schedule them and try to get people in them, but we know how our industry goes. You know what I'm saying? So, the last couple ones we did the last one or two we didn't fill, but honestly, to this day, it's been about now we're going about 2 years since the last one, a year and a half or so, and I like to refresh. I like to take it every year. And I look at my notes, but it's not the same as having them there. So I'm trying to figure out a scheme, a way to getting back over here. Maybe I can put a class up if I can get enough instructor candidates to come in, and maybe some other people to make it worth his while to come back. But he's my go-to dude for that reason.
Yeah, it's interesting, the ebbs and flows in the industry. It's everybody wants it a week after they needed it. It's like, guys, it's you're no less likely today than you are tomorrow, or you're no more likely to need it, so get out there, take the damn training. And it's one of Andy was talking about, I've had a couple instances where the training, unfortunately there were no, it wasn't like a life-saving effort. There might've been one, right? But it's the confidence and calmness that it gave me in this situation to take control of that situation when everybody else is freaking out, right? And you see the blood. So it was serious, right? You saw the blood squirting. So I was like, all right, hey, that's a big deal. We got to get this bleeding under control. We had a situation the other day, last week at my job where a 16-year-old kid went into a seizure. He started having a seizure, and his family was there. But I was on hold with 911. Not on hold. They did not answer the phone for 4 minutes and 48 seconds. So for 4 minutes and 48 seconds, I listened to this this recording of telling me, don't hang up, stay on the phone, yada, yada, yada. So I get on there, explain, hey, this is what's going on, give them the address. And they said, okay, I'm going to kick you over to the fire department. They're the ones that handle this kind of deal. So they transfer me over there, and then, the boy had finally gotten to that semi-alert stage. The dispatcher or whatever had walked me through the stuff. Okay, we got them on the way. They know where we're at. And he was like, if it gets worse, call 911. And I said, hey man, I was on hold with them for 5 minutes. Can I have your number? Because can I get the number of the people they're going to kick me over to? But it's like 5 minutes. If this was a massive hemorrhage situation, right? Like this person was bleeding out, he would have bled out 2 or 3 times before any help was able to even be dispatched to our situation. So, just the knowledge that, or the confidence that knowledge, gave me, was pretty reassuring. Randy Harris made a comment over here. He said, hey guys, I've been carrying a TQ on his person every day since 2005. Back then, people looked at you like you were crazy. I still think people look at us like we're crazy for carrying tourniquets. What are some of the other things that folks get hung up on, with regards to medical training or the everyday kit, that you've seen through your instructing?
Well, I know Randy. Hi, Randy. I've trained with him quite a bit and been friends with him for, I guess quite a while. One of the other things, especially on a guy like Randy who, he teaches his own classes, he shoots a lot of matches, he spends a lot of time on a range. If you've been around Randy, he's got a lot more surface area on his chest and on his back than he does in his arms and his legs, and his arms and his legs ain't small. I think that one of the things that is really underemphasized in, everyday civilian context is chest seals. Sealing up, putting a occlusive dressing on, any penetrating trauma of the chest between the Adam's apple and the belly button. And, people get that's kind of one of the things that I try to get, that I make clear in the class about the difference between what we do and the TCCC type model that all this came from is, when you're dealing with the TCCC world, you're dealing with people that wear, some type of chest armor and helmets. So I don't know about you all, but I can't tell you the last time that I wore a helmet. And the last time that I wore armor on my chest was the last shift that I worked in a patrol car, which was, 6 months ago. Aside from that, whether I'm on the range or shooting matches or whatever, I don't wear a helmet and I don't wear body armor. So helmets and body armor, if you've got, your arms and your legs dangling out there, but you got your torso covered, the chances of you having a penetrating chest injury go down because you've got armor on your chest, but your arms are dangling out there. So explosions and gunfire, that's something that is going to be susceptible to rounds. Well, in normal everyday civilian stuff, and this also applies to active killer incidents, we see a lot more head and chest trauma. And why is that? Because that event has to jump off at some point. And a lot of times the way that those events start is by dude walking into a place and saying, F you, Andy, and you either get shot in the chest or you get shot in the head, or stabbed in the chest or stabbed in the head. And there's your first either chest or head trauma. So nobody's getting winged. You're not getting shot in the leg or in the arm, at least not in the initial incursion. Maybe that happens down the road or, in areas where people are just spraying rounds into places. But a lot of these targeted killings are, a tourniquet would be, quite possibly useless for a majority of those injuries, where you're more concerned about penetrating head and chest trauma and then airway obstruction type stuff. And, airway obstruction can be something as simple as just positional asphyxia, meaning that the way that the person is laying, someone shot in a non-critical area, maybe in the abdomen. So it's something that, could kill them, but it's not going to kill them like in the, immediate, right then within the next few minutes. But, they are laying there and maybe they're shocky and, their respiratory, they start to experience respiratory depression. They're laying there on their back, and had somebody just turned them onto their side, they would be more prone to keep their airway open and fight a little bit harder to breathe. So, people are surprisingly easy to retard their breathing with just a little bit of movement of their neck. Any of us guys that like to sit in our recliner at night, while we're watching TV, we'll do the, like, it's not me. I don't know who that was. It doesn't take much flexion or extension of your neck to get you to a point where your airway is constricted. That's what snoring is. That's a constricted airway. So it can happen to anybody. It's not like, people that snore are just uniquely gifted or something. It doesn't work like that. Anybody can snore. So, a lot of those things, a lot of people that died at the shooting in Las Vegas, they died of asphyxiation or airway obstruction because of the way that they were positioned. Had somebody just turned them on into the recovery position and, kept them from getting trampled, there would have been a lot more people that would have been, survived transport and survived through a hospital stay. So that's one of the other things. So everybody kind of goes, hey, I got my tourniquet, I'm good on medical. Well, I mean, you got your arms and your legs covered. Now what happens if you're shot in one arm and one leg, or you're shot in both legs, or you put a tourniquet on somebody's leg and you twist it down as far as you can and the bleeding still doesn't stop, or it's some dude that's Randy Harris the size who's got, quads that look like, a big damn Christmas turkey, like they're huge. You put a soft T wide on those and crank it down, and you might not have enough. So you might need another tourniquet to put, directly above that one to apply enough circumferential pressure to get occlusion of that bleed. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that I think people don't take into consideration, and they sort of treat it like it's a binary switch, like they do with a gun. They're like, my EDC check, come on, man. Like, it's not that simple. If it was that simple, a lot of us wouldn't have to, we wouldn't be practicing all this stuff all the time. If it was something that's that simple, there's nothing in real life with this industry that's as clear cut, in real life experience compared to how we simulate it on the range, and even with some experiential learning type stuff. There's I can't tell you the number of times, like in a first responder capacity, where I've gone to places where there's a shooting and there's people that are injured, and I can't find the people who are injured, and I can't find the people who are the shooter. But I know they're here because I can hear them, but I don't know where they are. And I've also been to places where people have been stabbed before, and I see that there's people that have been stabbed, but I'm like, where's the stabber? Who's the assailant here? And people are like, I don't know. He went that way, but we got people here that are bleeding. So now do I tend to the people that are bleeding, or do I go get this guy who's doing the stabbing? So there's a lot of things like that I think that people don't think through in the same context. They'll think through all these things, like all these hypotheticals when it comes to, what their carjacking is going to look like, or what their Walmart parking lot fight is going to look like. But when it comes to the medical aspect of that, it's not even, they're not even in the ballpark. And then something happens and they're just totally flummoxed by the situation and unable to form a cogent plan in the time that they have, which can be, limited. So you got somebody that's got an active, large caliber or a large diameter arterial bleed, like you don't have a lot of time to, chalkboard out your plan. You got to either have something and go, or you're going to be dealing with a person that's got no blood left in them before too long.
I think he made a really good point there. I don't think it's in people's schema, as William April would say. Our when we all picture what it looks like, it starts with the guy approaching or whatever, what I'm saying, and we dealing with that. And then, like on YouTube or the movies we watch and all that type of stuff, the real ends, what I'm saying? Nobody wants to deal with the before, as we said, the how to, stay out of trouble. And nobody wants to deal with the lengthy afterward, which is where, the actual incident's a couple seconds, but everything, before and definitely after is a much longer. And that's not what people, I don't think they think about it much.
Yep.
Honestly, that, yeah, you could win the gunfight, but if you take a round to your leg, now you got a problem, and the clock's ticking, or your loved one who's with you, caught around or whatever, or whatever happened, and so I don't think that people think about it like that. We've got this very, Hollywood or 3 or 4 or 5 second video of what it goes down, and we do all our preparation into that, and not all the stuff that comes before and the other great amount of stuff that comes after.
Yep.
Yeah, our industry, I don't think we can decide on anything. Now we're arguing about jailbait splits and out shooting your headlights, and we should be training to half-second splits and all this other stuff. And Dr. Sherman, you were talking about chest seals as one of these things that's often overlooked in the industry. We had an instructor on for a medical course a few weeks ago, a month or so ago. That's a point that I had brought up. Is I was like, man, it's everybody has like a picture on their Instagram with their their sidecar holster and their tourniquet, right? And it's like, for me, I was like, man, aren't people getting shot in the chest? Aren't we getting shot in who's out there getting shot in their bicep or their thigh? Like, aren't people getting shot in the chest? Why aren't we talking about this chest seal stuff? So it's cool it was refreshing to hear that, because I was, for me, I'm like, nobody talks about chest seals, right? And I'm not seeing it anywhere. Nobody talks about chest seals. Everybody's talking, and nobody talks about airway either. I think tourniquets get all the love, especially those rat TQs. But Ak, I want to talk to you a little bit. What was your biggest takeaway from that course?
He helped me narrow it down to just what I needed and what to focus on. And, as I said, I had 40 hours at that point, what I'm saying? And I had a kit, and he changed my kit. Like I said, my original kit didn't have chest seal in it, what I'm saying? So now he told me, hey, tourniquets, chest seals, pressure bandages, how to work them. He worked on those things that we thought that we would need, that we, the Pareto principle. You can do these things, you'll handle most of the situations. And now I'm all about that. So the biggest takeaway was he helped me determine what I needed to focus on and what I needed to have in my kits. And I thank him a lot for that, because he like you said, when we take some of those classes, they're for different types of people. There may be, like he said, there may be military guys, teaching, and they mean well. They're just teaching from the context they know. And then you may have, the EMTs teaching it. They're teaching it from a guy who comes to a scene and he's got this. Sherman was like, all right, you're a gun toter, what I'm saying, or you're around your family. This is what might happen. These are the things that we think will mostly happen, and this is how you deal with them. And that's why I said, I was like, this is the class I wish I had. This was the class I wish I had. That was the first class, because that was the one for my particular context that was most appropriate for me, as a civilian, because I'm no longer, I do law enforcement training, but I'm no longer, a sworn cop. So for me, as a guy walking around in Walmart, this is what that guy needs. This is what this guy should have. And this is what this guy should have in his car, and that type of thing. And it was very, very, very practical. And I know sometimes that word gets overused, but it really was the most practical and applicable class, medical trauma class that I had.
I think Jeremy hit the thought on the tourniquet, right, and the chest seal and all that. When we teach our courses, I kind of make a joke about it because there's places where we can't carry guns. We explain that to students. So in place of it, a good example that I always talk about is concerts. For example, I love music, love go to concerts. So in place of my gun, I put a high IFAK kit around my ankle, and they don't sweat you about it. But oftentimes it looks like my ankle's kind of bigger. It looks like you can see there's something underneath my pants. But I tell everybody, hey, this is Albuquerque. Maybe somebody will think that that's my ankle bracelet and they won't mess with me, so I'm good. But
you say, hey, I'm a big guy, I got cankles, leave me be.
Right? You just got one. It's elephantitis of one cankle. I don't know. So Ak, you mentioned a couple times about this 40 hours of training that you came in with. Is that a lot?
That depends. I don't think so now. At the time, that was more than most of the people that I know. I mean, most people would take a 8-hour class or a 16-hour class. Most of the people I knew thought that they were okay with a Red Cross, CPR, first aid, heart saver type thing. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, if the person falls out, how do you do compressions and breaths, that kind of thing. So for me at the time, I thought that was, enough. Well, no, I didn't. As I trained more, I realized that it was going to be something as a non-medical guy, because I don't get the reps that guys like EMTs and guys like that get out in the field. That I need that class, because like when I take a gun class, my job after that class for the next however long is to practice what I learned in that class. The class to teach me how to practice or what to practice, whatever skill that I'm trying to get. But a medical thing, I can practice the TQ and all that. But see, the classes I had, they didn't even, for example, I don't remember them pushing, practice tourniquets, and so I had training, but I didn't think it was it was adequate. And for some reason, obviously, I didn't think it was as appropriate or as, as something that I felt like I could use. It was good to have. But when I took Sherman, for some reason, I was like, okay, that makes more sense. That I can see that. And then when the 8-hour class, he put it in the context, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, oh, wow, okay, so this is what it looks like actually coming in and doing these kind of things in these particular situations. And the people got a lot of it. There was one time he brought a bunch of Meharry students. Medical college came, man, and we had a ball in that class, man. And these are medical students, and they were learning stuff. You know what I'm saying? I thought that was interesting. So it was, though I felt like at that time I needed more. I had, I felt like, I'll be honest, I felt like I had enough. I didn't know what to practice most of all the things that I learned in those classes. Which ones are the most? Sherm laid it out, with his, bad guys, bleeding, breathing. He broke it down. He triaged it for me so that I had something that I could write on the back of a business card and, what I'm saying, and go, okay, this is how, if I run into that situation, so this is how I work. I know other guys did that, but I just felt like his was more practical for me.
I'd say 40 hours is more than the vast majority of even instructors in the industry. And I'm not aware of other high-level instructors that are out there that have 40 hours of medical training. On the other side of that, from my experience, and Andy could probably back me up, and I'd imagine you guys would have probably a similar sentiment, is that you don't need 40 hours of it, right? It is something that can be taught in a 4-hour block or an 8-hour block. And then, the annual refresher is really where it comes into play for what we do, right? I'm not out there performing surgery, right? I'm going to be rendering aid until the folks that have the equipment can show up and prolong life, until they can get that person to the dude that has an operating room with the team and all the gadgets and all the other stuff, right? And to render that level of aid it's not easy, but it's simple. And once you have the knowledge and the skills, it's something that your effectiveness exponentially increases. Sorry, Andy, I cut you off, but I wanted to.
No, you kind of hit the same thing I was going to say. It was kind of a setup to Ak about the 40 hours, because a lot of people don't know and they don't understand, right? So taking it back for me, I did a lot of firearms training for a while, and I was having a specific issue, and I finally found the right instructor that took me out, spent one range session, maybe a couple hours, figured out my problem and fixed it, right? All the other hours of training, of course, they helped, and of course it was knowledge. but that one person was able to round everything out for me to be like, here, this is what you need to focus on. This is your issue. And I kind of feel like it was, like I said, it was a setup to Ak, because Ak comes in with 40 hours of training. He goes to Dr. House over here. He spends a course with him that really basically, quote unquote, dumbs it down for us to where it makes sense and it can be much more of an application, right? Because I mentioned March protocol. That's what Jeremy and I taught, and I actually really enjoyed it. Hats off to Sean Heron, because he taught a great class a long time ago for us. But there is a lot to it, right? There's so many things to think about. And if you're not taking these refreshers, the next time you come, it's like, okay, first of all, what did March stand for? And then you're kind of trying to go through your head and, oh, I got a triage. And then, is this active? Is this passive? There's a lot to it. So that was kind of my point of where I was getting to, that sometimes a lot of hours doesn't always mean good hours, right?
Right.
I mean,
right.
How many times have we heard people on Facebook, I've been shooting for 42 years, son, and this is the best way to shoot. It's like, so yeah, that's kind of where I was at with that.
Yeah.
So,
and it was the first class that I took that was actually fun. I mean, because I as a guy who helps develop instructors, I tell guys all the time, I'll take a people person and teach them to become a firearms instructor, because some firearms people, pain in the ass. They may not be the nicest people. Give me a people person and I'll make them a damn good instructor. You know what I'm saying? And Sherman's silly. He's got this dry wit. The class, we're cracking up in the class, and at the same time we're learning. And so I see the value in that, because that's the kind of class that people enjoy. They actually enjoy coming to, and it'll be memorable for them. And so there's what he's doing, how he's codified it, and how he's present, but also just as important is how he's presented. But you're right. I got more out of Sherman's 4 hour than I got out of the 40 hours in the other one, because it was applicable.
So Sherman, another thing that you mentioned in your intro, that a lot of these questions I'm kind of asking for people that may not know. And you mentioned liability, right? You do CPR on somebody who's already dead. Well, there's not much liability there. So can you talk to us and share a little bit about something that maybe would be a liability, where someone got themselves involved in first aid that maybe they shouldn't have?
Sure. So when I see people that are untrained to a provider level, that are carrying like needle decompression darts, like a large gauge needle to do a needle thoracotomy with, to release trapped air in the case of a pneumothorax, to prevent attention pneumothorax. That's a big needle, and it's also one of those things where if someone's got that going on, you can do that intervention and it can save their life. But if you don't know what those signs and symptoms look like and have firsthand knowledge of what they look like, and you put that needle into somebody and you put it in the wrong place, you can cause some damage. And you can cause some damage that, if that person is not dying and you misread the symptoms, you can cause harm. So that's obviously not a good thing. With the things that I teach, the interventions that I teach, a chest seal, if you've got a penetrating wound to your chest, between your Adam's apple and your navel, and you put a seal on it, like, nothing is going to get worse than if you had just left it uncovered. And that's probably about the most invasive thing, that I teach. I mean, there's indications for when a tourniquet should be put on. But one of the other things that I think a lot of people really give short shrift to and don't place enough emphasis on is the importance of direct pressure, and like how useful it is. Everybody wants to like go to some kind of intervention, and for those that don't know, I'm a hospital dentist, so I'd say probably about 80% of my practice is surgery, and like not a day goes by in my clinical practice where I don't use direct pressure to control either like heavy bleeding, arterial bleeding, and it works, so people think that there's just arteries in your arms and your legs and in your neck, but those ones that go to your neck end in your jaws, or lead to your jaws. And so, you can get a pretty impressive bleed going on, and you can't put a tourniquet on somebody's neck. That's against the rules, everybody's rules. So, there's other ways to control those kinds of things, but man, I'll tell you, 90% of them I do with, strong grip strength and direct pressure. And you put that on there with some good gauze and hold on to that thing hard. It's not comfortable for the holder or for the recipient for about, 3 to 5 minutes, and you can shut down a lot of those bleeders. So that's another thing. I also see, from badge cam footage and ring cameras and things like this, a lot of people screwing around with medical interventions when they could just do direct pressure. So, I guess, direct pressure is a medical intervention, but what I'm talking about is equipment, so people are busy like busting out tourniquets and stuff there was a video, I can't quite remember, just very recently, where somebody I think they got the end of their finger shot off. They either shot themselves or it was a shot coming in. I can't remember which. And I can't remember if it was a law enforcement on duty shooting or if it was off duty, or a civilian, but somebody was shot through, or, shot the end of their finger off. And they were screwing around for probably about 90 seconds, like fiddling with this tourniquet, and if they had gauze or even a dish rag or something, man, just clamp onto that thing and just hold on to it with direct pressure. It's, it's a finger. Like, you don't sew the ends of fingers back on. So that kind of stuff where, it's kind of like you lose the forest through the trees sort of thing. So you are so focused on this singular focus, man, got to get this tourniquet on, even if you shoot the end of somebody's finger off and there's some arteries that, circumferentially come around your finger and they'll squirt, it'll squirt blood. So if the only indication that we give to somebody is arterial squirting and we got to put a tourniquet on them and they get that in their head, that's the only thing that's going to stop them. But I promise you that if any of the four of us grab a hold of that guy with a clean rag or a some 4x4s or some compressible gauze, or, even a clean cloth diaper or something, man, grab a hold of that thing, hold on to it, like, as hard as you're holding on to, a pistol that you're trying to shoot, 0.15 second splits out of, and hold that thing up higher than that person's heart and just squeeze the bejesus out of it. Bejesus is the technical term. Then after 5 minutes, that thing is not going to be bleeding anymore. Or if it is, it's going to be an ooze. It's not going to be as pronounced as it is. So there's a lot of those kinds of things that if you didn't know, you'd think, I got to put a bandage on this. Like someone's got a gash on their forehead. Those things are notoriously, bleeders. And then people be like, I got to wrap this thing up. I've seen people, when I was working in Nashville, one of my jobs there at the hospital was, we took care of any gunshot wounds that were between the floor of the orbits and the Adam's apple. So we'd have people that come in all the time, that have maxillofacial trauma and gunshot wounds, or penetrating trauma from, ice picks, knives, bottles, screwdrivers, a lot of screwdrivers, and they've been wrapped up like so extensively that, their airways compromised. You know what I mean? Like, you've wrapped so much stuff on there that they look like, John Merrick, the Elephant Man, before, with his bandages on, just like so wrapped up that you're not doing the person any good. You're actually like doing worse for them. I mean, is their airway maintained? Can they talk? If they can talk and they can sit up and their color is okay, like, you can drip some blood and you're not going to, bleed to death. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. I try and, I show some really gory slides because I want people to see those kinds of things And, like William April used to say, like, create a mental parking spot for these kinds of things. Because I don't want the first time that you see something like that to be the first time that you've ever even considered that before, And yeah, we've had people that get lightheaded, they got to scoot their chair back from their desk and put their head between their knees for a little bit. People have had to leave the room before. Yeah, it happens. But most of the time people are like, oh, dang, like I didn't think that was going to look like that, because people get a, false idea of reality from what they see on TV and on The Walking Dead and, John Wick and things like this. And it's really not what you think. Like, people that are shot in the face don't, always look like how they look on TV, and then quite the polar opposite of that, like if you see somebody that has been shot in the face with a shotgun, there might be a lot more people, parts of people missing there than you anticipated because of what you've seen on TV, So I always said that I thought the most accurate looking shotgun wound that I've ever seen depicted on the screen before was like when Arnold shot that T-1000 in Judgment Day, and his that metal fella, and his whole head like came apart like that. Like, that looked pretty accurate from the contact shotgun wounds I've seen before, because of course all of those were suicides or suicides or interpersonal violence, to the point where there was no saving those people. They were gone, as soon as that trigger was pressed. So if you're not accustomed to seeing or having dealt with something like that in the past before, when you actually happen upon something like that, you might be quite shocked and not really realize what you're looking at. So I try and give people kind of a little slideshow through hell to see like what that, actually looks like, from pictures from my clinical practice and then also from things that I've experienced in my career.
Are those images worse than the images you share on social media?
Well, a lot of them overlap. Yeah.
What are some of the are there challenging aspects of that course for students to grasp, like things that they just struggle with, either skills or knowledge wise?
I don't think so. I mean, I think probably the biggest thing that I hear, and I think probably that Akil has heard too, is like people just go, at the end of it, they go, shoot, like I had no idea that I was like what I didn't know, that like I've just scratched the surface here over the last, 4 or 8 hours. And I had no idea that I was like this unprepared for these kinds of things, And when we do the 8-hour class, it's a little bit different. What I do is like a thing I used to call like the Coliseum, but I guess it's more like I like what Craig Douglas calls it, with like the experiential learning lab. I always called it like the vicarious learning laboratory, because while like, for example, like I did I have some on my phone, even with some of my guys from the school that I brought, that are surgeons, and they have, these are people that deal with this kind of stuff on a regular basis, and they wouldn't know how to deal with it in the field until after they, took the class. So, but like Akil was saying, there's, you put a couple people through a scenario and, I try and make it like relative to people's lives. So, if you're a high school student, maybe, it's an active shooter kind of thing. If you are a guy that works at a factory, maybe it's an accident at a factory. If you are a guy that works in an automotive shop, somebody gets their hand crushed underneath a machine, those kinds of things, or a lift, or, something like that. So something that's relative to people's lives. And while that might not be something that you experience, you have to be respectful and like let that other person go through their thing, but you're watching it and you're seeing what they're doing, and you can think, what would I do in that scenario? And what were we taught in this class to do in this scenario that this guy's not thinking of, because he's in the middle of a fight, flight, or freeze response from his sympathetic nervous system, freaking out, trying to remember what he's supposed to do. And we work through it and, and help them get to the point. But by the end of it, you know, everybody, if there's 15 people in the class, you've seen 15 scenarios that you were personally part of, at least one of them. And now you've seen, you know, like, so you can kind of go back to that. And although it's always more real for the person that's experiencing it, I mean, Akil's seen it. We've had people like sweat through their shirts. We've had people like kind of come a little unhinged, you know, like cry. We've had people like have to go outside and like yell it out a little bit, you know, like, I mean, it's a real thing. And that's literally just by like, you know, it's a safe area. There's no live weaponry of any kind. But that's literally just like me, you know, sometimes whispering something into somebody's ear, you know, and just saying like, that's your kid laying there. And then they just, you know, you can actually see their pupils go, you know, like that. Like you can hear the epinephrine like hit their brain. And then they either get it or they don't. And so if they don't, I mean, we've had people where we've had to like literally grab them and be like, you're cool. Like everything's fine. Like this is, you know, a simulation. It's not real. And then they're like, oh gosh, you know, like, so I think it's beneficial for people to get that if they can, you know.
We've had all types of students come into class too, and we tend to poll them, and you know, with all levels of experience. And I bring instructors in, and I'll talk to students after, because, like I said, we're about the gateway in a crawl, walk, run thing. And I've had them tell me, some instructors, you know, that guy, he was great, but you know, I don't feel like he asked us to do things, but didn't show us quite how. Never had that situation with Sherman's class. Everybody was always very happy with it, and some of them wanted. We had people who took it several times. Actually, a couple of them who were looking forward to it coming back again, because they, I didn't have that situation I've had with other instructors. So.
You know, Sherman, you mentioned, you know, you had doctors in class, and one of the classes that we took, I think it was an ER doctor. And that was the thing that she had said, is she was like, I have no idea how to do any of this stuff outside of my, you know, the operating room or whatever, the emergency room. And it was, you know, as a student in that class, it was like, man, that's pretty telling, because here's somebody that's gone through medical training to the nth degree, and has found value in a one-day medical course that's kind of designed specifically for that reason. It's like, how do we save their life long enough until additional help and additional resources show up? You know, so that's pretty neat. What do you think is an obstacle people have to taking a medical class? Is it just the, you know, it's not going to happen, it's not going to be my house, my work, it's, you know, it's never going to be my day? Or do you think it's, you know, there's a belief that it's beyond their scope of ability?
I don't think that anybody thinks that it's beyond their scope of ability. I think that a lot of people honestly think that they're more likely to use a firearm than they are to use their medical skills, which I think is silly. I mean, you know, I can't tell you like how many people that I know that are like that have used their firearm in numerous instances, and one thing they all have in common, they've all used their medical skills a lot more. Like, even if their medical skills were as, you know, rudimentary as, like, you know, Akil was saying, like a lot of first responders are, is just like getting somebody else there, like running comms, you know, to get somebody else there. Like, there's a lot of that. I don't know anybody who has a child that has not had to use some kind of medical something at some point in that child's life, like, period. I don't know anybody that's gotten away with it, you know. And I've got, you know, 6 brothers and sisters, and they've got kids, and, every damn one of them's like bonked their head, fallen off of their bike, hit their head on a diving board, you know, slipped on sledding, you know, done something like that. So it's just so much more common. And I mean, you know, just me like driving the highways and byways of this country, you know, I've done, you know, on the job and off duty, like CPR probably close to 1,500 times. I can't tell you how many like canisters of Narcan I've gone through. You know, dressings at car wrecks, you know, things like that. Just, I mean, I don't even really keep track of it anymore. I mean, just is something that happens. So I can't be the only one. It's not like I'm just that tremendous of a shit magnet for the last, you know, 32 years that it just keeps happening to me and it's not happening to anybody else. I mean, it's happening all over the place. I don't know if it's lucky for them or unlucky for me, or, you know, if I'm the person that you do want to run into in a dark alley. I don't know. But I think that that's probably one of the big things. And I think that the other thing is that a lot of people in the training industry like to do things that service their ego. So, you know, you can post a picture of I mean, hell, I do it myself, you know. I mean, I do it more to just be, you know, a smart ass. If you know me, like I you know, I like to, I mean, I make fun of, I roast the hell out of people. Like Aqua will tell you, I love roasting people. Like I go out of my way to do it, but I also like it when people roast me back. Like I think it's really fun. So I'll put a lot of stuff because I feel like it's ego service. You know, you're like, check this, you know, look at this B8 I shot, you know, under pressure while Tom Gibbons was burning a hole in the side of my head with his mean eyes, you know. But at the same time, what do you get? You don't get no ego service out of a medical class. You're like, man, you know, I just like learned a bunch of stuff I've never heard before. And then I, you know, sweated yellow rings all the way through this shirt that I wore while, you know, 14 other strangers watched me struggle on the floor trying to put, you know, a blue tourniquet and some fake pressure bandages onto a pool noodle. I don't know shit, you know, like nobody's going to put that. There's, you know, there's no cool merit badge that goes along with that, you know, other than what you get out of it. So it's hard to take a picture of that, I guess is the best way to say it, you know? So I feel like there's a lot of the things that we live with these days, and I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else. But I mean, there's times where I think, man, look at this sunset, you know, like I live out here at the edge of the country. So I see the sunset some days and I'm just like, it's beautiful. And I sit there and appreciate it. And I think like, I'm the only one that's seeing this. I should probably take a picture of this and put it on social media so that everybody else can see it. And then I have to stop myself and just go, man, I love y'all, but you know, this is not something that needs to be photographed. This is just something for me to appreciate. Same thing. So I think that there's a lot of stuff that people feel like if I can't take a picture of this, it's not real. Like I can't put it online and show it off. And so they don't find any, you know, utility or merit in doing it, which sucks. I mean, there's that. I think you miss out on a lot of things if that's where you're coming from.
I agree with that. So I have a couple questions. How long is this course again?
Well, I have a 4-hour version and I have an 8-hour version.
Okay. So on your Gateway to Instructor course, just kind of a sidebar question. Do you guys talk about medical in that class?
We don't teach it, but we do mention that there's a point where I talk to the instructors and I go, these are the things that you should have, you know, a mentor, a library, you know, blah, blah, blah. And one of the first things at the top is if you're not doing medical training, you're not taking this stuff seriously. I mean, in fact, I can comfortably say medical is at the top, you know what I'm saying? Because if you're out there, if you're taking people out to shoot and you're not prepared to deal with a situation like that, then we know that borders on malpractice, if you ask me. So yeah, those people are going to be looking to you for that. And if you can't provide some type of leadership or some type of ability in that area, then you shouldn't be taking people out, especially out to remote areas to shoot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was kind of brainstorming this whole deal with you talking about bringing Sherman back out for you. Maybe that's something you guys look at, to where you pair this up to where Sherman comes and does a 4-hour for the gateway to instructor too, and give that option to them, because I think it's huge for new instructors to not only talk about it, because we're already talking about this right now, like the difficulty of getting people into that class, right? And then we say, hey, new instructors, y'all should go find some medical somewhere, or go to these guys, but do they do it? And so if you had an option of maybe adding this 4-hour, hey, we're going to have this 4-hour as an addendum to add to it, I don't know, might be an option.
I've thought about it, and it's something I considered, probably something easier logistically when he was here. But there was something that me and Tiff talked about. I think one of the reasons why people don't take it is because they don't see the dopamine in it until after they actually took it. After I took the class, I was like, man, there's no reason why I shouldn't be taking this darn class every single freaking year, But other people look at classes, think about it. I mean, what they really take the classes for is, because they enjoy doing it, and they get a little bit of dopamine. They get a good feeling about coming and doing it. That's why we do a lot of the stuff that we do, truth be told, to be around people that of like mind, and because we actually enjoy doing it, get a little tingle when Tom Givens is born, drilling laser beams in the side of our head, and we shoot a good B8, because we're into it. But other people, I don't think they see it ahead of time. It's kind of like like I said, the stay out of trouble class. They don't see where the dopamine is ahead of time. They can see it, maybe, oh, I'm shoot this gun and I'm gonna have some fun or whatever. But now after they take it, then you see people who take medical classes tend to take more than one medical class. I think a lot of them do, because once they do it, they go, wow, this is actually probably the most usable class I've taken, all this stuff. But the thing is getting them there. That's all.
Yeah, I think so. For the people out there that love that ego, whether you want to admit it publicly or not, you love that ego of like being impressive to show your B8s on Facebook or whatever. I'll tell you, if you want an ego boost, go take a medical course, and then you have that day that you use it and you actually help somebody and they say thank you. You want to talk about an ego boost and an eye sweating day of being proud of yourself that you actually did something well. That's what a medical course is about. That's kind of my opinion, because I've experienced that myself, and I know probably all of us on this panel has.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've trained with like Larry Vickers before, and if you know who he is, he's a former member of like one of the most elite military units in the history of the world, and that guy has shot people before and in combat. And, he said that like, I practice and I have you guys practice and train shooting these B8s because I want you to be, accountable for a small target. But I can promise you that under real life conditions, even if you are highly practiced and very skilled, your groups are going to be at least twice that size. So, we get kind of wrapped around the axle about this preoccupation, what Jeff Cooper called preoccupation with inconsequential increments. So, we're trying to get these, we're obsessing over these split times, and we're obsessing over, these group sizes that we can shoot under pressure and all these kinds of things. But like, there's a point of diminishing returns there, where maybe instead of spending 4 hours, trying to go from a 0.22 to a 0.19 split time, we spend those 4 hours and actually use something that is going to make a discernible change, down, somewhere in somebody's life. And could be our own, or could be our kid or our spouse or whatever. Because, the difference in real life between shooting a 0.19 and shooting a 0.22, is probably not going to do anything that's going to save your life. And it could also definitely do something that could negatively affect you. I don't know anybody that is going to have a bad outcome or a negative outcome from learning more about how to save people's lives during the worst moments of their life. So, like I said, you don't have to take a class from me. I don't give a damn. Take a class from Caleb, take a class at Lone Star Medics, take a class from Carrie Angel. Good God, I'm sorry, Carrie Davis at Dark Angel Medical. You can punch me in the face next time you see me, Carrie, if you can reach my face. But yeah, take a class from those guys. Take a local Stop the Bleed class. There's other, open enrollment instructors aside from, the three guys that have been doing this the longest. So there's plenty of classes out there available. You just kind of have to look. And, they're all useful. I've yet to take an open enrollment medical class from somebody where I didn't get, at least something. So something positive, I should say, not the other way where you're like, I've heard something about how I'm not going to teach it in the future, not like that. So yeah, I think that there's a lot that you can get from it and find beneficial for sure.
Is there anything that we should have discussed that we haven't touched on already? I guess before that, what about wound packing? Is that something that is a important skill for the civilian defender to have?
Absolutely, yeah. So wound packing really comes into play when you talk about junctional bleeding. So junction is, junctions in our body are basically where our limbs and our neck meet our torso, or our pelvis. So those areas, if you suffer an injury there, like the most famous one that people resonate with the most is like in the movie Black Hawk Down, there was one of the Rangers that took a round into the pelvis and wounded his femoral artery, but up, your femoral artery goes quite a ways up into your pelvis, and it actually bifurcates at your navel, at the level of your navel. So it goes up there quite a ways. And he had this proximal injury, this injury that was far up that artery to the point where it was not controlled with a tourniquet, and actually couldn't even be visualized because it was so far up there. So in a case like that, you have to be able to still apply some kind of direct pressure. And all wound dressing, whether it's a tourniquet, which is basically controlling bleeding by applying a whole bunch of pressure, circumferential pressure, far upstream of the area that's bleeding. Wound packing, applies direct pressure, but at a localized point. So you're putting a bunch of surface area onto something that's really small. So you're putting as much surface area of material as possible onto what the area, that's bleeding. And then of course, compression dressing or direct pressure does the same thing. You're using pressure to apply as much surface area with as much pressure as possible to the area that's bleeding. So with wound packing, you're just addressing basically what I call like junctional bleeding. So that's the utility in that. We do talk about that at great length as well. So, and show people how to do it. So.
What about hemostatic gauze? Is that something that is necessary, unnecessary? If you can carry it. Otherwise, stick with bandage or just regular gauze?
Yeah, I mean, there's peer-reviewed research that shows that, in some cases it does prove beneficial. But I think most people that do this on a regular basis, like you can get pretty good results with aggressive wound packing using just, like Curl-X gauze or compressed type gauze, that is a lot less expensive. The problem is you, with hemostatic gauze, you might have a ribbon of hemostatic gauze that you buy for like $40 at REI. And that's like maybe 2 yards or 3 yards of gauze. You can buy a compressed cube of gauze that's like 10 yards of gauze for like $3. And, if you, and with the hemostatic gauze, like if you actually change it out when they expire and stuff, you guys know how it is. Like some people complain about, having to spend $35 on a box of 20 hollow points. Imagine spending $40 on a piece of gauze where you might not even be able to get that person to show up to the class for $75, you know? So, you know, you can do a lot of good with just compressed conventional gauze as far as wound packing goes. But hemostatics, I mean, nobody's ever going to like be like, oh no, you got hemostatics? Yeah. Don't give me those. Just give me the conventional gauze. Yeah.
That makes sense. Appreciate the clarification. Is there anything that we should have talked about that we haven't touched on? I feel like we did a pretty good job, but
I think everybody's going to find a lot of utility with insomnia with this episode, and hopefully everybody that started it finishes it with us, but we'll see.
No, we've had a constant group of viewers, which is cool to see. I know Randy jumped back on there in the comment section, and he appreciates you describing his body the way that you did. No, he just talks about he's gotten into arguments with people in the industry about chest seals, but those dudes sell. And then James Barron, he said you should check out, or you should present at the Hinman meeting. Sure, it would sell out. Not sure if.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm quite familiar with the Hinman. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if it would sell out. People might accuse me of being a sellout if I presented the Hinman, though. That's big time ATL. So I don't know if I've got that one in the bag yet.
I'm sure you do, man. Sounds like I know Ak has taken a ton of training, and he speaks very highly of you. And it's cool to say, man, it was the right 8 hours of training, and this is comes from a dude that he trains and he receives training on a regular ass basis. So, Andy, you got any parting words before we get out of here?
Oh man, for me. It's a great episode. I was joking about how I could maybe put you to sleep, but it shouldn't be. These are in my opinion, these are the shows that you should be paying attention to. And if this conversation hasn't sparked anything in your brain as far as going out and getting medical training, and you're involved anything with firearms, I don't know, life, then you're doing it wrong. That's my opinion. We got to get more medical training out there. I think it's hugely important. And I feel like Sherman here should be so busy with medical training that he doesn't have time to do his other training, which, you know, I doubt it's going to happen anytime soon, but that's kind of my thought process on it. But anyway, thanks for you guys both coming on the show. I appreciate it. It was very educational for us. I think it was a good, even just mental refresher on some things to rethink about, because it's been a while since we've taken a course. But yeah, thanks you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, it would be nice if it was that busy, but one of us has got to have a yacht so that the rest of us can come on it. So if I keep doing what I'm doing, you know, the chances of getting to a yacht are a lot better than if I'm teaching hemorrhage arrest classes every weekend, 48 weekends a year. So.
Yeah. And if it goes to crap, you're 2 miles east of the Atlantic Ocean, right? 2 miles west of the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, 2 miles east of the Atlantic Ocean. You're in a different part.
Yeah. I'm right up there by Maine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just head north until it starts to get really cold. You'll find me
there. You can find Dr. Sherman House and all of his stuff at civiliandefender.com. And then all of Ak's stuff at citizensafety.com. We appreciate y'all giving us your evening. I'd like to give you the rest of it back. Remember, it's your life, it's your safety and protection, it's your responsibility. Y'all stay safe.